You think you're being kind, supportive, loyal. You say, "I'm here for you," and you mean it. But slowly, so slowly you don't even notice, it starts to cost you. Your energy, your voice, your identity. One day, you wake up and realize you're exhausted, anxious, scanning every room for emotional danger that isn't even yours. Not because you're weak, but because you were never taught the line between compassion and self-erasure. No one told you that empathy has a limit, that without boundaries, even love becomes a trap. You were raised to believe that the more you give, the more you'll be loved. But what if that belief is exactly what's keeping you stuck in toxic patterns? What if your greatest strength, your capacity to care, is also the very thing being used against you? Carl Jung called it unconscious identification. When you lose yourself inside someone else's pain, their silence becomes your mission, their moods your responsibility, and somewhere in that fusion, you disappear. This video is not about blaming others. It's about finally seeing what's been invisible for years. The quiet ways you've abandoned yourself to stay needed, to stay chosen, to stay safe. You'll learn how emotional fusion disguises itself as love, how codependency seduces you with praise, and how saying no can be the most sacred thing you ever do. If you've ever felt drained for no reason, or scared to take up space, this might be the truth your nervous system has been begging you to hear. No one warns you that disappearing doesn't always feel like pain. Sometimes it feels like devotion, like you're doing the right thing. You listen. You show up. You hold space. You adapt your tone so they don't get upset. You shrink your problems so theirs can breathe. You believe you're being kind. But underneath that kindness, something is slowly breaking. Because each time you silence your truth for someone else's comfort, a small part of you dissolves. Not all at once. Just enough to feel useful. Just enough to feel needed. Until one day, you're still standing there, but you're gone. Carl Jung called this unconscious identification. It's when your psyche fuses with another's so deeply that your own boundaries vanish. You don't think. You're being thought. You don't feel. You absorb. Their silence becomes your puzzle. Their moods become your weather. And you stop asking where you end, and they begin. This is emotional fusion, not intimacy, but enmeshment. It sounds noble. I'm just being supportive. But there's a cost, and it's always paid with your identity. Because love without boundaries isn't connection, it's collapse. And the collapse doesn't look dramatic. It looks like always saying yes, always being okay, always staying small. People call it loyalty, devotion, maturity. But make no mistake, this is codependency wrapped in gold, and it thrives in silence. You become the strong one, the safe one, the one who never needs anything. You pride yourself on not being a burden. But strength without rest is self-destruction. You don't just get tired, you get empathy fatigue. Because you're carrying two people's emotions without ever dropping your own. You scan for danger that's not yours. You regulate tension you didn't create. And slowly your nervous system forgets what calm even feels like. This isn't peace. This is emotional hypervigilance. It happens to people who were raised to be helpers, to fixers, to givers. People who learned early that love is something you earn by disappearing. You grew up watching others fall apart, and you made it your job to hold them together. So now you keep playing that role. But every role has a cost, and this one costs you your voice, your preferences, your sense of aliveness. You don't explode. You endure. You apologize for existing. And the saddest part? No one notices, because your pain is quiet, your suffering is polite, and you've become so good at hiding it, even from yourself. Jung believed that true healing comes from individuation, knowing where you end and another begins. But how can you do that when you were never allowed to take up space? How do you reclaim a self you were never taught to honor? That's the dilemma. And that's why this pattern feels impossible to break. Because it's not just about the other person's needs, it's about your fear of losing their love if you stop meeting them. So you keep rescuing, keep softening, keep serving, not because you want to, but because somewhere inside, you're terrified of what happens if you don't. And here's the trap. The more you give, the more the system expects. The more you abandon yourself, the more you're praised. But that praise is a leash. You're not loved. You're used. Not always intentionally, but functionally. You're a buffer, a mirror, a fixer. And when you stop performing, the system breaks. That's why they get angry when you say no. That's why they guilt you when you rest. Because they were never in relationship with your fullness, only your function. And that's the most painful realization. You were never truly seen, just consumed. If you're nodding right now, you're not alone. This isn't rare. It's everywhere. In romantic partnerships, in friendships, in parent-child bonds that never evolved. And it doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. You were conditioned into this, but conditioning can be broken. Awareness is the first cut in the script. Because once you name the pattern, you stop playing it. Once you recognize the cost, you begin to reclaim what was lost. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. And what begins as grief becomes freedom. Not easy, but real. Not loud, but lasting. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Have you ever felt like love was slowly erasing you? Like your kindness became your cage? Drop a comment below and share what that looked like in your life. Your truth might give someone else the courage to face their own. It always starts with a simple moment. You feel pressure rising, but instead of saying no, you smile and say, sure. Your mouth moves before your mind can stop it. It doesn't feel like a betrayal, at least not yet. You justify it. It's not a big deal. I'll speak up next time. But that next time rarely comes. Because what you're dealing with isn't a communication issue. It's psychological conditioning. You've been programmed to equate love with compliance, peace with silence, value with sacrifice. So you keep saying yes, even when your entire body is begging you not to. That's not kindness. That's fear dressed up as generosity. Carl Jung warned about the danger of unconscious identification, merging so deeply with another person's needs that you forget you have your own. It's not just about being agreeable, it's about survival. Because somewhere in your story, love became a performance, a tightrope walk, a test you must pass again and again, and every yes you say against your truth is another audition for acceptance. But this isn't love. It's codependency, reinforced by toxic relationship patterns that punish individuality. You start shaping yourself around someone else's comfort. And over time, your yes becomes less of a choice and more of a habit of self-abandonment. It's not that you don't want to speak up. You do. You feel it. That rising discomfort when your boundaries are crossed. But then comes the shame, the guilt, the inner voice whispering, "Don't make it worse. Don't be difficult." So instead of setting limits, you over-explain. You apologize for having needs. You soften the blow of your truth until it no longer lands. That's not communication. It's collapse. You're not being heard because you've stopped speaking clearly. And the worst part? You think it's your fault. You think your inability to hold boundaries means you're broken. But you're not. You were trained to disappear. These symbiotic traps form early. Maybe your parents praised you more when you stayed quiet. Maybe your first relationship rewarded you for being low maintenance. Either way, the message got planted. Love others first, and maybe, if there's space, you can matter too. But there's never space. Because when people benefit from your silence, they learn to expect it. That's how emotional manipulation works. Not always through cruelty, sometimes through comfort, through, "You're the only one who gets me," through, "I couldn't do this without you." Sounds sweet, right? But under those words is a contract. Don't stop meeting my needs, or I'll withdraw love. You keep saying yes because the cost of saying no feels unbearable. You imagine losing people, causing conflict, being called selfish. So you betray yourself to keep others comfortable. But here's the truth. Every yes you say while your soul screams no creates a fracture inside you. And fractures, when ignored, become wounds. Chronic ones that manifest as anxiety, as burnout, as bitterness you don't understand. It's not because you're too sensitive. It's because you've spent years pretending your limits didn't matter. That's the real danger of emotional fusion. You become so merged with another person's comfort that your own pain becomes invisible. And here's what no one tells you. Saying no isn't the hard part. It's facing what happens after. The withdrawal, the silence, the tension in the room. That's what you're really afraid of. Not the word no, but the punishment that follows. And so you start policing yourself, editing your tone, managing their reactions, not out of love, but out of fear. And that fear keeps you trapped in a role, the easy one, the reliable one. But that's not who you are. That's who you became to be accepted. And the longer you stay in that role, the harder it gets to find your way out. This isn't about blaming the other person. Many times they don't even realize what they're doing. This is about reclaiming your agency, about remembering that your needs aren't negotiable, they're real. And honoring them doesn't make you less loving. It makes you whole. You weren't put on this earth to be someone else's emotional buffer. You were meant to live with clarity, with truth, with boundaries that reflect your worth. And yes, you might lose some people along the way, but anyone who only loved you when you were silent was never loving the real you, just the version that served them. And yet, breaking these patterns takes more than awareness. It takes practice. It takes unlearning. And most of all, it takes courage. Because every time you say no with your full chest, you risk being seen, truly seen. Not as a function, but as a person. That's what we'll dive into next. What happens when you stop rescuing and start remembering your worth? We'll explore how setting psychological boundaries is not just rebellion, but a sacred return to self. So let me ask you, have you ever said yes just to avoid conflict, even when it hurt you? Share your experience in the comments. Your truth might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. People say setting boundaries is about self-respect, but they rarely mention the backlash. Because the moment you stop overgiving, something shifts. The smiles fade, the energy changes. You're no longer playing your part in the unspoken contract. The one that said, "I'll keep you comfortable even if it costs me." And when you break that deal, the system trembles. It's not just disappointment you face, it's resistance. Sometimes subtle, sometimes explosive. Why? Because your identity wasn't built into the relationship. Your function was. You were loved for what you did, not who you were. And when you stop doing, you stop being safe. This is the moment many people give up. They try to set a boundary, feel the wave of guilt or tension, and run back to old patterns. Not because they're weak, but because they've never been allowed to exist without earning their place. When you've lived your whole life proving your worth through self-erasure, saying enough feels like violence. But it's not violence, it's clarity, and clarity is threatening to anyone who benefits from your confusion. This is the danger of toxic relationship patterns. They rely on your silence to survive. Break that silence, and everything that was hidden comes into view. Carl Jung called individuation the process of becoming whole. But that process always begins with separation. You have to step out of the fusion to see who you really are. And that's terrifying. Because individuation doesn't just require strength, it demands the death of your old self. The self that said yes to everything. The self that tolerated mistreatment. The self that confused approval with love. And death always brings grief. So don't be surprised if claiming your space feels like losing everything. That's not weakness. That's rebirth. The pain you feel is the price of returning to yourself. Most people around you won't understand it. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're not as nice anymore. But what they really mean is, you're not as easy to control. Because boundaries expose the truth. They show who respects you, and who only tolerated you when you were convenient. And that's the gift of setting limits. It burns away the false connections, the ones that depended on your silence, on your guilt, on your exhaustion. It hurts to lose them, yes, but it hurts more to keep living a lie. You're not here to serve, you're here to live. And living means disappointing people sometimes. It means letting them sit in their own discomfort instead of rescuing them. It means learning to say, "That's not okay," without justifying your pain. This is what real psychological boundaries look like. Not fences made of anger, but of truth. You don't need to yell. You just need to be clear. And that clarity won't always be welcomed. But it will be respected by the right people. By the people who want your presence, not just your performance. That's the shift. From being tolerated to being valued. From being useful to being real. But don't expect applause. This kind of transformation happens quietly. It won't make you popular. It might make you lonelier for a while. Because as you rise, you'll lose people who preferred you small. You'll outgrow roles that once felt like love. But every time you say no with conviction, you open space for a deeper yes. A yes to your health, your clarity, your life. That's the sacred rebellion. Reclaiming your time, your mind, your energy, not to hurt others, but to finally stop hurting yourself. This isn't selfish. It's sovereignty. And you've earned it. Still, many remain trapped. Not because they can't see the pattern, but because they fear the emptiness that might follow. They worry that without the role, there's no identity left. That without being needed, they won't be wanted. But that fear is just another illusion, a final trick of codependency. Because your worth isn't in what you do for others. It's in who you are when no one is watching. And when you finally sit with that truth, something shifts. Not loud, but permanent. That's the moment you stop surviving and start choosing. So let me ask you this. What's the hardest no you've ever said, and what did it cost you? Drop it in the comments. Someone else might be trying to find their voice, and your story could be the bridge. At some point, you have to ask yourself, how much of your life have you lived for someone else? How many of your yeses were really silent cries for help? How many times did you sacrifice your peace just to be seen as good, loyal, easy to love? You weren't born to be a mirror. You were born to be a whole, living person, with needs, limits, voice, and truth. And if that truth threatens someone's comfort, that doesn't mean you're too much. It means you're finally becoming real. So today, choose one moment, one situation, one person, and ask yourself, am I still showing up out of love or out of fear? Then act accordingly. Set the boundary. Speak the truth. Say the no you've been holding in your chest for years. Not to push people away, but to finally come back to yourself. And remember, individuation is not about isolation. It's about integration. You can be caring and clear, loving and sovereign, present without disappearing. So if this video spoke to something you felt, but never fully named, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because we're just getting started. There's more to uncover, more to heal, and more of you to reclaim. Because the world doesn't need another version of who you thought you had to be. It needs you, fully seen, fully present, and finally free.